Whatever Kurt may have lost with a limb, he gained with a statue. Here's your look at the Diamond Select Premier Collection Marvel's Spider-Man's Lizard Resin Statue. A decorated wartime surgeon and gifted scientist, Dr. Curt Connors became obsessed with reptiles' ability to regrow lost limbs after losing his own arm in battle. After countless hours of research, he developed a lizard DNA-based serum that he hoped would regenerate his missing arm. However, upon testing it upon himself, a horrible transformation occurred. Though Connors did regrow his lost arm, the formula continued its effect, changing the doctor into a monstrous reptilian creature driven by animalistic hunger and savage instinct. Ever at odds with his own grisly alter ego, Connors desperately seeks a cure, hoping his next transformation into the terrifying lizard will be his last. This approximately 11-inch tall resin statue of the lizard is based on his comic book appearance and features a high level of detail and exacting paint applications. It is limited to 3,000 pieces worldwide. Before looking at the scales, the tails, and everything in between, let's grab the tape measure and see how tall the Premier Collection Marvel's Spider-Man's Lizard statue stands. Not a relatively new statue, but still one I wanted to look at here on this channel. Lizard statue, though, if we look at the arm being the highest point on it, you're looking at it being about 11¼ inches in height, or it's going to be about 29 centimeters tall. Genetically altered or not, generally is still the case that the Premier Collection statues from Diamond Select all come included with their certificate of authenticity. And in the case of the Premier Collection Marvel Spider-Man Lizard, he also comes with one to indicate to you that it's out of a very limited run of only 3,000 copies worldwide. I have noticed when it usually comes with the Premier Collection of resin releases that they usually sit out around that 3,000 mark worldwide. The one that I just happen to have here is out of 500, or 500 out of 3,000. It's a single printed card, but one that I usually like to have displayed along with the statues when I have them on the shelf. If I don't have as much quarters to work with, then of course usually I just put the certificate back in the box. It's always good to kind of hold on to the certificate if down the road you decide you want to part ways with it. I will never be planning to part ways with the lizard here. It's too cool of a statue to miss. Now the statue has him actually perched on top of what seems to be a sewer grate. Picking carefully up the statue, it's a lot heavier than you probably would imagine, just because, again, it's cast here in all resin. The front and the back of the statue actually mimic very nicely the open area of a gate, probably leading inside of a sewer layer. The actual sewer itself has been very successfully cast here in resin, along with, of course, all the rest of the statues going to be perched on top of it. But I really like the way they've actually painted and sculpted the rock facing. All these individual bricks, some have been broken off, probably not from the lizard himself, but just over wear and tear and time of having these rocks just being out. If we spin this actually around, now this is of course obviously the front that has the lizard on top, but if you spin it around though to the back, you'll see that it's just as detailed as it is to the front. It's one of those cases really where you can actually have these statues, and Diamond does this really well when it comes to resin releases, that they usually make them at 360 statues. In other words, you can put them in places where the statues will be seen from all sides. The coloring again is really nicely done on this, for the obvious reasons of this guy being a little bit more fragile. Just take my word for it that on the bottom of the base that I'm tapping at right now, it would actually have the same numbered sequence of 500 out of the 3,000. Just for, again, I didn't want to tip this upside down for the risk that the statue may potentially break. Of course, this all being cast in resin, it's also been hand-painted, and a really nicely hand-painted statue of lizard we actually get. It teeters, though, a little bit, though, in the torso. I don't know if it's just by the way they actually assembled the statue together that maybe it isn't one piece together, that maybe perhaps the shirt was attached onto the actual sleeves or the actual forearms of the lizard and probably attached onto the torso. It teeters just only by a little bit, but not to the point where I feel like it's broken. The statue's face of the lizard, of course, nicely detailed there. The only thing I would really say, though, when it comes to the actual paintwork for the lizard, while so nicely done here in the green, the sections of the eyes, of course, really glistening with the very bright gold and the little slit that he has for his eye, I feel like both his interior of his tongue or interior of his mouth, as well as actually the sockets of the eyes, could have really afforded to have a little bit of a darker color. They have really relied on just the green that's around it. If they had only gone in and, say, for example, darkened that up, on the back actually of the box, they have it a much more darker green, almost even borderlining black, that I think it would have probably worked a little bit better to darken the areas around the eyes, just so the eyes would pop a little bit better than what they actually do. The same can also really be said for as well the tongue. While the tongue looks really good, the interior of the mouth really is about the same color. If they had just toned the notch down by just one darker shade, I feel it would really help to bring in more contrasting colors. So you'd have, like, for example, the interior of his mouth be a little bit darker of this pink, so that the tongue and the teeth around it would stand out a little bit better than what it is. He's actually got a really neat pose to him. And one of the reasons why I really wanted to get this statue was I've always been a big fan of the lizard. I didn't really like the lizard necessarily in the original Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man movie, just because that version of the lizard had him more with the rounded snout. I always really think that lizard should always have a very predominantly long jaw, and it works really well here for the statue release of him. Of course, the colors that you would expect Curt Connors to have, like the purple, for example, with the torn off knees and ripped away sections of the pants, have been, again, nicely done here. And of course, he still has his lab jacket on. How his lab jacket still remains pretty clean, despite the fact he's probably walking around in a sewer lair, is beyond me. But they have, though, if I spin this around very carefully, you can see that they've kind of darkened the areas around the wrinkles, just to bring some of those folds out into the foreground. And of course, if we tilt this up slightly, you can see underneath there, he does have his, of course, very nicely scaled tail that wraps very coolly around, not only starting from, of course, the back of the actual statue, but then wrapping its way around to the front. It's a statue that certainly does show well from all sides. One of the things I really like, though, about the Premier Collection statues, Dahm's also really been doing it well also with the gallery PVC statues we've been looking at here on this channel as well. But the benefit of these, of course, is the higher end, higher ticket price. But I think for a ticket price that allows us at least to get a resin release of the lizard, yes, to be honestly fair, this guy could have also been released as a PVC gallery statue. But really where the money is, where I think a lot of the work ends up going into, is when they start to do the Premier Collections. And the lizard looks fantastic. A little bit biased, of course, by the fact that I'm just a big fan of the lizard, but I think he actually turned out to be a really neat looking statue. Granted, yes, he is going to be a little bit more expensive than your traditional PVC gallery statues that Dahm's been churning out as well. But if you have the funds available, if you have the budget set aside, definitely pick up this lizard, because it's a great showpiece to be putting on your shelf. The lizard is a lot like Man-Bat for me. Not just the fact that you've got a scientist that's meddling around with serums that he shouldn't be playing around with, ultimately altering his own DNA. But also the fact that neither one of those characters are ones that I really put high on my list of all-time favorite villains for that respected superhero, but ones that I always find interesting when they are featured in stories. Lizard is one of those cases where Spider-Man isn't dealing necessarily with a human with human thought process. Rather, instead, he's dealing with a feral creature, and because of that, he has to alter his technique a little bit differently. He's not one of a character that also is one just to stand around. So obviously, when it comes to a statue release of him, they'd really want to put Lizard in a sort of a crouching or about to leap position. You can tell really by the way that he's on top, perched on top of that sewer system, and the way he's got his one arm extended like this, that he's likely going to be leaping down at the wall crawler. Hopefully the wall crawler would even know he's coming. One thing I really like about this statue, not only is the perfect pose that they put the figure in, but also as well, like the colorings on this guy work really well. Sure, yes, his jacket could have been a little bit dirtier, but you really don't want to make it too filthy. The white contrast works really well against the green scaled skin that he has. Speaking of the skin, though, something I did mention in the review here of Lizard is I do wish that they could have added a little bit of darker contrasting colors. He has a lot of green, but you can see like on the top of his tail, for example, he's got a darker shadowing of that kind of in a grayish scheme. I wish they could have brought some of that maybe into the socket area around his eyes. He's also got it around his neck too. If they had only just darkened the area around his eyes, I think it would really allow those peepers to pop a lot better than what they do. But the form of the statue, the tattered way they've sculpted the jacket, and again, just a perfect display stand that they've got the figure on top of. It's a really great looking statue of Lizard if you can ever find this one in your stores. Now, I say ever find because it depends on really where you go to your local comic book stores. I would always certainly suggest as well, if you're in the market of wanting to get into Premier collecting statues, then I would probably suggest going to a local comic book store. Just because, again, with these being hand-painted and hand-cast resin, you really want to make sure, of course, that nothing is broken on any of the statues. I had a little bit of weebling when it came to actually Lizard's torso, but I don't think anything is broken. I'm just going to check again to make sure that's not the case. It clearly isn't, from a showpiece standpoint, something that's going to be broken on the statue where I'm looking at it right away and thinking, oh, no, something is actually broken on him. He just seems to weeble a little bit. And of course, if you are looking to get these statues for yourself, it's always really kind of best advised to try to find these at your local stores. Because if you ever happen to get these home and something ends up being broken on them, you can then go back to the store where you purchased it from and see if you can get either an exchange or a refund. It's a lot harder to order them online, because by the time you get them back to your house and you open it up and you go to put them on display and you realize that something's broken on them, then you have to go through the process, of course, trying to reach out to the store online and having to ship them back. But yeah, if you are a big fan of Lizard and a big fan of Spider-Man, definitely worth picking up if you can find this guy. What's your favorite Spider-Man villain? Let me know down below in the comment section. Lizard, I don't know if I would probably put in the top 5. Maybe closer to the top 10. But he's still an interesting enough character. What's your favorite? Who is your favorite Spider-Man villain? Let me know down below in the comment section. In the meantime, though, if you guys did enjoy the review here of the Premier Collection Spider-Man Lizard, hit it with a like. If you guys are, of course, loving the content you guys are seeing and certainly on board to see more statue reviews, if you haven't already done so, make sure you hit that subscribe button down below and you're turning on the bell notification. As always, guys, thanks for watching. See you guys next time.